Hello, comm students. In this video, we're going to go over a piece of persuasive writing and critique it. And hopefully you can follow along with me and think about what's good about this writing and what could be improved and made better. Before you go any farther in this video, please make sure you have read this short piece that I posted in the description for this video in Brightspace. You can pause and go back and read it. I would also recommend you have it open in another tab as we go through this video, so you can maybe jot down some comments on it or read along as we go through it. The introduction to this piece says, as parents, we all want what's best for our children. We want them to grow up to be happy, healthy, and successful adults. One of the best ways we can help them achieve these goals is by enrolling them in preschool. So what's the first thing that I notice about this introduction is that it starts out with, as parents, we. And that tells me that this article is written for a very specific audience, and that is people who are parents, right? And the person who is speaking, the author of the article, is also a parent. And that makes your readers buy into what you're saying a little bit better right off the bat, right? Because you understand that the author is like you and is speaking on a topic that they might know something about, considering they're also a parent. Is the introduction engaging? I think it's okay, but I think it could be a lot more engaging. I think you could talk about a specific kid here, tell a story, or put an anecdote in here, or an interesting statistic. For example, if students that attend preschool are twice as likely to graduate college, or something like that, could be really eye-opening and engaging and make your readers want to keep reading. So I think it could do a little bit of a better job in terms of the introduction. It's also really short. This introduction needs to be longer, and it needs a thesis statement. So even though this isn't an academic essay, it still needs a thesis statement because that's really the anchor for the rest of your piece. That tells your reader exactly what your position and your topic is, and it should also kind of list out what the arguments are going to be that you're going to provide. So I would add a thesis statement, and I'll give an example of one that could be used. So here's the thesis statement that I've added. Sending young children to preschool provides them with a structured learning environment that promotes cognitive and social development. So there's one argument. I'm going to talk about promoting cognitive and social development. Leads to long-term benefits such as higher earnings, home ownership, and decreased involvement in criminal activity. So here are two at least solid categories of argument that I'm going to talk about in this piece. So you can see this kind of rounds out the introduction and gives it a really solid anchor for the rest of the piece. It's a signpost. Your reader, think of it as a roadmap. Your reader now knows exactly what to expect going forward. In an academic essay, you would not use headings like this necessarily unless it was a really long paper like a thesis or a dissertation or something like that. However, when you're writing for a website, which tends to be a little less academic and slightly less formal, it's pretty common to use headings and even to bullet out some information if it makes sense to do so. And so that's okay here. So I actually like using headers because I think when you're reading on a website, people tend to read really quickly. They tend to not spend a whole lot of time engaging with web articles. And so if they can get a really quick glance of what your pieces of evidence are, it may actually help them want to keep reading. So the first one here is the social and emotional benefits of preschool. Here we have an anecdote. Now, I would move the anecdote if this was a student paper and I was providing feedback. I would say, why not move this anecdote to your introduction, right? Really catch your reader's attention right away with a story, especially if you're talking to parents and you provide a story about a kid who's struggling and things aren't going well, and they go to preschool and they suddenly turn into a totally different kid, right? That's going to kind of grab the heartstrings of your parent audience. So think about really what appeals to your readers. You learned in the lesson for this unit about logos, ethos, and pathos, right? And pathos is the one that really appeals to emotion. And this is one way, especially when you're writing to parents, that you could really appeal to their emotions. So think about who your audience is and what kinds of information or stories or types of evidence are really going to appeal to their emotions and and make them really convinced to follow your argument. So in this anecdote, first of all, I would say that this sentence is a little bit redundant and unnecessary. So I would remove it and just kind of start here. In fact, you don't need to say my friend's son. You could just say Alex. So he was a shy and introverted child. However, when he started attending preschool, he became more confident and outgoing, and his social skills improved significantly. This is an example of an anecdote that I would say is lacking a little bit of information and could use more. So tell me about, instead of telling here, do some showing. How was he shy and introverted? Did he cry every morning when he was about to be dropped off at daycare? Or did he stand in the corner all day at daycare and refuse to interact with the other kids? Or, something. Give me something. Show me how he was shy and introverted and how that impacted his life in a negative way. And then again, show me how he became more confident and outgoing. He suddenly started to have a big smile on his face every morning before school, or he asked to have a play date with a friend that he met at school or something, right? Show me how his behavior changes. And that again is really going to help appeal to my emotion as a parent. You can say this highlights one of the many benefits of preschool. This is okay. It may not be necessary if you've done a really good job showing the benefit that you're talking about. You may not have to say it as much. Just state it like this here. Then you can see we go into some research, which is good. We want to provide evidence to support our arguments. We're talking about crucial social and emotional skills that come from preschool. And then we're going to talk about this. According to this study, preschool education has been shown to enhance social competence in young children. So we've got a direct quote here that is signaled by an introduction, which is good. And there is an in-text citation. So a little bit about APA citations here. Technically, an APA in-text citation should include the author, the year of publication, and if it's a direct quote, you need the page number as well. But that doesn't all have to be in one set of parentheses at the end of the quote. You can kind of incorporate it into the sentence if you want to. So for example, in this one, according to Barnett et al., we have the author in the introduction, so it doesn't need to be in the parentheses at the end. And they put the year right here in parentheses, which is also acceptable for APA style. Then they have the quote, and then so at the end they just put the page number. That's fine. If for some reason you don't include their name, the author's name in the introduction, then you would put it here. You would add Barnett. If you didn't have the year here, then you would add that as well. So it all depends on how you incorporate it into your cited material. If you're in doubt, you're not sure, always lean towards putting all the information in. Okay, at least in my class, you're not going to lose points for over citing information. So a couple things I want to point out here about the citation. First of all, notice how this first piece of cited information, it says, with studies showing that preschool can improve children's social competence and reduce behavior problems. This is a summary statement from a source that is cited. The reason why it's a summary is because it's giving an overview, overall information about a source. If it was a specific piece of information, like a statistic from that source, and it was not a direct quote, then that would be a paraphrase. It's okay to use interchange. In fact, a solid piece of writing will use all three types of cited material: summary, paraphrase, and direct quotes. For this particular article, you're only required to use direct quotes. So you do not have to paraphrase or summarize information, but you certainly can do so if you want to. Now, one thing that's not good here is that this piece cites two back-to-back pieces of information. And even though they're related, you never want to do this. You need to put something in between your cited pieces of information that connects the dots. So think of it as laying like a brick wall. You would never put brick on top of brick on top of brick. You need that adhesive in the middle to make it all stick and connect and stay together. And that's what you need here as well. So you need something to explain why this piece of cited material points back to your argument. So you can see that now I've added a line in between the cited material to talk a little bit more about how preschool can improve social competence and reduce behavior problems. So I just indicated a line here that doesn't require citing because it's pretty much common knowledge about what happens when little kids are in school, right? We're talking about behavior problems, we're talking about social competence. So some examples of that include kids learning in preschool about sharing and taking turns and waiting in lines and being quiet while other people are speaking. So that just kind of goes back to the point and demonstrates how this evidence supports my argument. And then we move on to this next piece of evidence here, which is a direct quote. Now, typically you want to use really important pieces of information that are hard for you to restate in your own words in your direct quotes. So just keep that in mind. And then finally, the last sentence of this paragraph kind of restates, sums up what the paragraph or what the section is about. It's actually 2 paragraphs here. By enrolling our children in preschool, we're giving them the opportunity to develop the skills they need to succeed in school and life. So it just wraps it up. It's a summary sentence at the end of this section. Now we're going to talk about a study here. So we're saying preschool can also help children develop cognitive and academic skills. This is the topic sentence of this section. And then we move to the evidence. A study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology found that children who attended preschool had better math and literacy skills than those who did not. This is a paraphrase because it is a specific piece of information from a source, but it is restated in my own words, and so it is not a direct quote. But it still gets cited because it is evidence that came from a source. And here again, we have a back-to-back paraphrase and then direct quote, which we want to avoid. So I'm going to go ahead and add some filler in between to connect the dots. All right, so I've added a few sentences here to make more of a connection and really develop and flush out this argument in more detail than it had before. So now it says, educational psychology found that children who attended preschool had better math and literacy skills than those who did not. Preschoolers spend most of their time at school learning about letters and practicing how to make them, as well as learning basic counting and addition skills. This practice provides a great foundation for kindergarten and beyond, and can give them a boost when it comes time to learn to read and do more complex arithmetic. This time is even more crucial for low-income families where parents often have less time to work with their young children to develop these early skills. The results suggest that pre-kindergarten programs that are high in quality can improve the school readiness of low-income children. So you can see I've tied it all together. In the beginning here, we didn't talk about low-income children, but it was added to this direct quote. And so I made sure to tie that in by adding a sentence in here about low-income families and how preschool is even more beneficial for them. So now we've got a really rounded out argument. We've got evidence to support it. We've got the topic sentence here, and we've got the summary sentence down here. This could probably all be one paragraph rather than being separated out. But other than that, I think this section is in pretty good shape. Now, in your pieces, you may have a lot more to say in these sections. They may be 2 or 3 paragraphs long, which is perfectly fine. In fact, I want you to make sure that you really kind of get everything you want to say out into your arguments. You want to stay clear and concise. So you don't want to be extra wordy when you don't need to be, but you need to make sure that you get all of your points across and get your evidence out. Okay, so then the last part of this, now this piece is pretty short. Yours will be longer than this. In the end here, this says investing in our children's future, but really this is the conclusion. Here's one thing I want you to do right now is write a note to yourself to not include the words in conclusion in your writing ever again, okay? Because it's not necessary. If you write it in your rough draft, fine, but cross it out, delete it, or do something so that you know in your final draft, just take it out. You can put a transition word here if you want to, like ultimately enrolling our children in preschool is a wise investment in their future. Or it should go without saying that enrolling our children in preschool, whatever, but you don't actually even need it. If you just say this, enrolling our children in preschool is a wise investment in their future, this whole sentence is a transition to the end of the article. So you really don't need that transition word. So don't put in conclusion in your papers. And then we just have a summary here of the arguments. It can provide them with the opportunity to develop social and emotional skills, cognitive and academic skills, and has long-term benefits. As parents, we owe it to our children to give them every opportunity to succeed in life. So you can see we're going back to as parents, so appealing back to that audience of like-minded people, right? Whenever you can kind of say we're in this together, that's usually a good way to be convincing and persuasive. And we wrap it up kind of nicely with a bow here. A couple of things I would do in this conclusion. I would make it a little bit longer. I think it's a little brief. And it's a great idea in your persuasive writing to give your readers next steps. Maybe it's a call to action. For some of you, you might be writing about an issue and you want people to contact their state senators or their local representatives and push a certain policy or bill or something. Or you want them to stop buying plastic, or, do something for the environment, or stop driving their cars, start riding their bikes more, whatever it is. So think about what your call to action is going to be and make sure that you put that in your conclusion. So you've got your readers, they're listening to what you have to say, they're buying your arguments, they believe you. What do they do now? What do they do at the end? So in this case, in this article about preschool, you might provide some information on how to find a great preschool, how to find a preschool that fits your needs, what types of preschools are out there. You can include some more information that is beyond your persuasive argument, but like, now I've got you, I've persuaded you, so here's what you can do. Here's what I can give you, some reference materials or some next steps to help you move forward. Okay, so think about how you could include that in your conclusion. So you can see I've just added really briefly one sentence to my conclusion here that's like, okay, if you're ready to start, here's what you can do next. Check out the resources below, which will help you pick a program in your area that works for your family. If you say you have something below resources, make sure you do include some. But so what I would do if I was writing this piece is below my article, I'd have preschool resources, and I would include some links to websites that help you pick a good preschool, or maybe you have a complimentary article on your site that is how to pick a preschool, like a process analysis piece of writing, for example. Maybe your persuasive writing can point back to that one if they're related enough, and that can be a resource, or it could be the next step. Now that you've convinced them, you want them to go read the how-to piece. So think about some other resources or some next steps or call to action or phone numbers or whatever it might be that you could provide for your readers so they know what to do next and they have another step to go to. So overall, I think this piece is getting better. I do think it needs another argument. It really only has 2 different arguments here. This third is really just the conclusion. It's not really another argument. It doesn't have any more sources or pieces of evidence in it. So if this was a student's piece of writing, I would say they need another argument, another solid section with more evidence to build on. I think having 3 arguments is a really good place to be in a paper for this particular class. If you want to have 4, that's completely fine, but I definitely think more than 2 is appropriate here. Now, when you're writing academic persuasive essays later on, if you take Comp 2 or you take another class in your future where you have to write an academic essay, everything you learn about writing here is still going to apply. You just might have to change your tone. You might have to write a little bit less casually, or just think about your audience. If your audience is professors or scholars or whatever, that's going to be different than the parents or the young people who like to travel or whoever you're writing your websites for in this class. So it's something to think about. It's not really going to change that much. I think one of the things you're learning in this writing specifically is how to be concise and clear, because you all go to websites and probably read articles here and there, and you know that our attention spans, especially when reading online content, are super, super short. And so we need to be engaging and we need to write clearly and concisely so that our readers don't get bored and they want to keep reading. All right, I think that does it for this critique. Good luck as you begin writing.